Okay, so today is May 23rd, 2023. Two readings from Acts and the Gospel of John. Let's start with John. At that time, the Pharisees took counsel against Jesus and said to one another, "You see that you can do nothing. Look, the world has gone after him." Now, among those who went up to worship at the feast were some Greeks. So these came to Philip, who was from Bethsaida, Galilee, and said to him, "Sir, we wish to see Jesus." Philip went and told Andrew. Andrew went with Philip, and they told Jesus, and Jesus answered them, "The hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. Truly, truly, I say to you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. He who loves his life loses it, and he who hates his life in this world will keep it for eternal life. If anyone serves me, he must follow me, and where I am, there shall my servant be also. If anyone serves me, the Father will honor him. Now is my soul troubled, and what shall I say? Father, save me from this hour. No. For this purpose I have come to this hour. Father, glorify your name. Then a voice came from heaven, "I have glorified it, and I will glorify it again." The crowd standing by heard it and said that it had thundered. Others said an angel had spoken to him. Jesus answered, "This voice has come for your sake, not mine. Now is the judgment of this world. Now shall the ruler of this world be cast out. And when I am lifted up from the earth, I will draw all men to myself." He said this to show by what death he was to die. The crowd answered him, "We have heard from the law that the Christ remains forever. How can you say that the Son of Man must be lifted up? Who is this Son of Man?" Jesus answered them, "The light is with you for a little longer. Walk while you have the light, lest the darkness overtake you. He who walks in the darkness does not know where he goes. While you have the light, believe in the light, that you may become sons of light." Okay? And Acts. In those days the Athenians took hold of Paul and brought him to the Areopagus, saying, "May we know what this new teaching is which you present? For you bring some strange things to our ears. We wish to know, therefore, what these things mean." Now all the Athenians and the foreigners who lived there spent their time in nothing except telling or hearing something new. So Paul, standing in the middle of the Areopagus, said, "Men of Athens, I perceive that in every way you are very religious. For as I passed along and observed the objects of your worship, I found also an altar with the inscription, 'To an unknown God.' What therefore you worship as unknown, this I proclaim to you. The God who made the world and everything in it, being Lord of heaven and earth, does not live in shrines made by man, nor is he served by human hands as though he needed anything, since he himself gives to all men life and breath and everything. And he made from one every nation of men. He made from one every nation of men to live. And he made from one every nation of men to live on all the face of the earth, having determined allotted periods and the boundaries of their habitation, that they should seek God in the hope that they might feel after him and find him. And he is not far from each of us, for in him we live and move and have our being." Okay. So one thing I wanted to say today regards the psychological method. And the psychological method takes every individual, every person in a story, and assigns it some referent in the mind. And so I think there would probably be a fair bit of resistance to this. But what I want to say about it is not that I'm not making any kind of epistemic claim about the Gospels. I'm not saying that I know something about them or even an ontological claim about. All I'm trying to say is there is a psychological implication of these stories, and that's what I'm trying to describe. I'm not saying that they were intended this way or only this way, or that it's their primary meaning or anything like that. All I'm saying is they can be profitably read psychologically. Okay. So the Pharisees are the ego, and the ego is saying, told you so. And I think we can say the Greeks were just that's just the common sense, basically, of the mind. Okay. And then Jesus is now saying, so Jesus is the being of the human being. He's saying, this being will be glorified. So we talked yesterday about the way that the being of the human being is in conflict with nature. So being is light, and nature is darkness, and light illuminates the darkness, but the darkness is that into which the light must be embedded in order to become real. So he's saying that the being of the human being must be sacrificed and die. And so here again, we talked yesterday that the eternal being, well, it's not eternal, the being of the human being, the ego has to witness the death and resurrection of the being of the human being. So maybe it's worthwhile today to say something about what the being of the human being is. It's not really soul. It's not really spirit. It is the way I think about it is think about a body, and the body is just a physical thing, and the being of the human being is what makes it alive. It's what makes it also a person, and what also makes it presence. It's the non-physical presence of a person. Okay, so we talked about all this yesterday. If anyone serves me, must follow me where I am, I shall be a servant also. Okay, now, so this is it's not the soul. Again, it's not the soul, it's not the spirit, it's the being. It's the being of the human being, which is a human being. It's a person. It's an objective presence. James put it. Alright. So it's counterintuitive, you have to watch it die. Crowd standing, I heard this thing, an angel spoken to him. When I am lifted up from the earth, will draw all men to myself. So now he's talking about I think this is the ascension. So in the Greek Orthodox calendar, the ascension is in the next few days. Oh, this voice came for yours, not mine. The voice from heaven was, I have glorified it, and I will glorify it again. When I am lifted up from the earth, will draw all men to myself. So I think this is maybe now is an interesting time to start to say something about, we can talk about Nietzsche. So I have an interpretation of Nietzsche that I don't think is particularly popular, but I think is interesting and potentially right. Let's see where I can find this. So, because now we're talking about, so Nietzsche has the idea of the overman, And so the ascension of the being of the human being is essentially the overman. So the overman is, it's probably in my draft somewhere. The overman is, for Nietzsche, it's like the higher being. But you hear this all the time about like a higher being. And so, see if I can find it. He says that I'm drawn up higher. Okay. So this is Nietzsche talking. My will clings to mankind. I bind myself with chains to mankind, because I am drawn upward to the overman. For there my other will wills me. So if you read psychologically this passage from the Bible and the ascension of Jesus, if Jesus is the being of the human being, and this being of the human being is ascending, then we can start to see the parallel where Nietzsche says, I am drawn upward to the overman, for there my other will wills me. And two, the words of Christ are, men will be drawn to myself. So in both, there's this parallel where there is the being of the human being, and there's is not only, I think, in struggle and conflict with nature, but also it rises above nature, and it's towards that ascending being of the human being, towards which men, in this case representing kind of just consciousness will be drawn to the being of the human being that goes before it and goes above it, towards which men will be drawn. I also do want to make mention briefly, I think Nietzsche is I dare to say misunderstood, and I think one of the most kind of explicit ways he's misunderstood is in this statement, God is dead. So if you kind of think about, here again, I think is a parallel. So in the Christian tradition, what we're even been reading is that Jesus is God who dies, and he was killed by the betrayers, that is, the Pharisees, which we've interpreted psychologically to mean the ego. And Nietzsche says God is dead and we have killed him, which is the same as saying Jesus is dead and the Pharisees killed him. It's the concept of the being of the human being, which is divine, undergoes the persecution of the ego and the unconscious. And the persecution by the ego, man starts to realize over time. So when man comes into consciousness out of unconsciousness, his consciousness is no different from his unconscious in terms of kind of structurally, behaviorally, attitudinally. And so in the very way in which the light comes into darkness or being comes into nature, and there's a struggle and persecution, what Nietzsche is saying, God is dead and we have killed him, is that our egos are still structurally, behaviorally, attitudinally the same as nature. The nature that is in struggle with the being of the human being, or the light. And so what we talked about yesterday was the reorientation of the ego away from its natural proclivities into a new mode of being which seeks to avoid killing God. Okay, so I would say plainly I think it's probably most correct to say that Nietzsche was a Christian, in the sense that his theological system uh, attempted his philosophical system attempted to be a post theological Christianity. I mean, I think a lot of yeah. So let me just leave it there and see. I mean, I don't think anyone will ever listen to this, but that would be an interesting thing to talk about. Okay. All right. So the being of the human being goes before the ego and goes above it. And part of Nietzsche's and Nietzsche and Jesus both are saying it will draw all men. It draws the ego to it. Okay. We have heard from the law that Christ remains forever. How can you say that the Son of Man must be lifted up? Jesus said, the light is with you for a little longer. Walk with it while you have the light, lest the darkness overtake you. He who walks in darkness does not know where he goes. While you have the light, believe the light, that he may become sons of light. Okay. Alright, let's look at Acts. Took hold of Paul and said, we know what this new teaching is. What is it? Paul is teaching something new, and the Athenians are asking, what are you teaching? Okay. Paul, standing in the middle, said, I perceive that in every way you are very religious, for as I passed along and observed the object of worship, I found also the altar to an unknown God. What therefore you worship is unknown. This I proclaim to you. The God who made the world and everything in it, being Lord of heaven and earth, does not live in shrines, nor is he served by hands as though he needed anything, since he himself gives all to men. And he made from one every nation of men to live on all the face of the earth, having determined allotted periods and the boundaries of their habitation. They should seek God in the hope that they might feel after him and find him. Yet he is not far from each one of us. In him we live and move and have our being. Okay. All right. So he kind of dodges the question a little bit, but I think kind of the relevant part. So the being of the human being gives to all men life and breath and everything. He made from one every nation of men to live on all the faces of the earth. Having determined a lot of periods and the boundaries of habitation, is to seek God in the hope that they might feel after him and find him. I mean, this is kind of just talking about the underlying currents of natural reality. It's not far from each of us. Okay, I don't think there's too much here.
Okay, so I do want to say some more about Acts. So we talked this morning, it's now the afternoon, about the relationship in the Gospel of John between the ascended Christ in Christianity and the overman in Nietzsche. So psychologically, the ascension is the being of the human being that goes before the human being or above it. And so what is important here, and that you see a lot, especially in secularization of the Christian mythology or metaphysics, is that that overbeing, the being that goes before the human being, is kind of the end, is both the beginning and the end of God. But what Acts reminds us of, importantly in the text for today, is that in addition to this going forward, there's also this kind of original unity. And so I think the idea was, so in Acts, what we read today is not only is there, as in the Gospel of John and as in Nietzsche, this being that goes before the human being, the above being, the overman, which is also the ascended Christ. That's not the beginning and the end in this metaphysics. What we see in Acts is that, so towards the end of the passage for today, Acts 17, Paul is talking, and he's talking about Christ as the unknown God. And he says, and he made from one every nation of men to live on all the face of the earth. So I'm going to look this up briefly. You're not going to be able to see this. I don't have the video going. But it's Acts 17:26. And he says, the New International Version says, from one man he made all the nations, that they should inhabit the whole earth. And he marked out their appointed times in history and boundaries of their lands. So what's important here, in contrast to what we're seeing in the gospel, is it's not just so to read this psychologically, right? So to read this psychologically, from one man, he made all the nations. And so psychologically, the nations represent the aspects of the psyche. And all aspects of the psyche come from a single man. And so there's this division of unity into multiplicity is the important part here. And so that's worth spending a little bit of time on, because it's not only that the being of the human being goes before the human being as the ascended self towards which the self aims, but it's also that over being is also one man. It's the center of the being from the beginning. And so even within the psychological frame, so when we talk psychologically, we're talking about a time-limited life, my psychology, because we're talking about something finite. And so again here we're asked and compelled to think, as we did with the Romans, that it's not the intrusions of the outside world of the Romans, but the unconscious. And so here too, one man from whom all the nations came, read psychologically, is the inception of the individual person. And it's the being before the being goes before the human being. It's the unity before the multiplicity. Because the transcendence and ascension of the being of the human being is towards a unity out of multiplicity. But that multiplicity came from the very unity towards which it strives. And so the being of the human being is the Alpha and the Omega. Read psychologically, the Christ who is the Alpha and the Omega is the being of the human being, which is the Alpha and the Omega. So I thought that was important to add today.